Hi everyone, welcome back to Uke Theory with Matt Stead. In the last video I'm really hoping I was able to shed some light on the modes and make you realise that really the modes, if you think about them in relation to the major and the natural minor scale, aren't that different, aren't too hard to remember, and in this video I really want to show you how useful they can be. It's all very well learning the modes, but obviously you need to put them into context and see how you could use them. I'm going to concentrate on just one mode today and show it in relation to the original major scale. The reason being there's 7 of these things, and if I did a different example on each of them, we'd be here until Christmas time. Unless you're watching this on Christmas Eve, and then I guess it wouldn't be. Sorry, I'm being daft. So let's have a look at how we can actually use these modes and put them into context. Now, the differences between the modes and the major scales can be quite small. So if we have a look at the difference between C Lydian and C Ionian, the only difference is this F sharp. But just having that one different note there, that sharpened fourth as opposed to the normal fourth, can make all the difference. So let's think about how we could use these modes. We could either create melodies with them, solo, or create melodies for vocals or instruments, or we could create chords using them. So let's tackle melodies first. So why might you need to know the C Lydian scale? Well, if a song is written in C Lydian, the chords, which you'll find out soon, will be different from C Ionian. So the notes that you will mostly want to solo over will include the sharped fourth as opposed to the normal fourth. So I'll give you an example. In C Lydian, we'll find out in a minute that the fourth chord that you would play is a form of F sharp diminished. And that F sharp diminished has an F sharp in it, obviously. Now, if you're soloing and you're using an F when that F sharp is being played, it will sound awful because notes that are half step away just don't sound very good at all. So when whoever you're playing with or the record or whatever is playing an F sharp or an F sharp diminished, you'll want to play an F sharp note there, or make sure that you don't play an F, more to the point. So it's important to know these. If you're playing along to a piece in C Lydian, the notes that will make up the melody will be the notes from C Lydian. Therefore, the notes that you want to solo with will be C Lydian as well. And even if you don't want to solo, just understanding the melody and understanding which notes are going to come up, it's useful to know that that fourth degree will always be a sharped 4. Another thing is sometimes if you just want to make your own solos or melodies, you know, if you're creating a melody from scratch, you might want it to sound a bit more exotic. Try one of the different modes and you'll get these different flatted or sharpened notes, which can add a little bit of flavour to your pieces. So for instance, I think in the last video we did a little snippet of a scale. So say I was just noodling away in the key of C, and I might have something like... I'm not even going to tell you notes, I'm just literally just noodling away. And it sounds a bit nursery rhymish. It's like, it's all right, it's a bit boring, isn't it? But if I just turn every F into an F sharp, there's a slight more tension there. There's really unusual brightness on that F sharp. So that's something that you might want to experiment with each of the modes. See what different options you get from those notes. This mode is really interesting. A reason a lot of composers built melodies from it was they loved the fact that this gap here, this interval, is only a half step. And some composers found that when they compose using the C Ionian, it felt a bit slovenly and a bit kind of a bit heavy, because this F almost feels like it has a resolution on it, almost like it's a second tonic. I'll show you what I mean. If I play this cluster of notes and then this cluster, so C, D, E, F, and then G, A, B, C. Can you see how it sits quite naturally on the F? which can feel like, oh, it hasn't got that kind of nice movement. Whereas if I play an F sharp rather than the F, you almost have to go to that G. So it creates this kind of more fluid movement, this kind of sense of movement throughout the whole piece. So that's one of the reasons composers used Lydian, for example. There's a bit of a concept that I need to kind of, a bit of a myth here as well that I need to blow away just quickly. Now, you might think only kind of medieval church music or classical composers use the modes, but actually a lot of pop music uses modes as well, whether the composers or not knew it. A really nice example is Norwegian Wood by the Beatles, which goes between Dorian and Mixolydian mode. Now, it's an interesting thing. John Lennon was once asked what an Aeolian cadence was, and he said, is it some kind of exotic bird? Because he had no idea what modes were. But he was using them instinctively. Whether or not he knew he was doing it, the chords that he chose fit within these two modes. And if you were playing along and you were soloing, say you were George Harrison, and you were only using the notes from the major scale, sometimes you would have notes that would have clashed with those modes. And sometimes you'd be missing out on beautiful possibilities by not knowing those two different modes. So that's why it can be incredibly useful. Where I think it gets really interesting and where the modes really make a difference is when you start building chords from them, because as well as using them to make melodies, you can use them to create chords just like you would a normal scale. So do you remember, if you think back to that chord building video that I did a while ago, if you haven't seen it, it might be worth looking back at some point. Chords are generally built, diatonic chords in fact are always built by playing a note, skipping one, playing a note, skipping one and playing another. So the first note, the first chord in the key of C is C, E and G in terms of notes. 1, 3, 5. So I'm always skipping one. So C, E and G just give you a C major chord. So that chord is exactly the same in C Lydian, C major, C major, because the notes don't involve this one. But have a look at what happens when I start to build the second chord in the key of C. I start from a D, and in the normal major scale, or the Ionian mode, we go D, F, A. Now a D, an F and an A note, you don't need to know that because I'm about to tell you, form a D minor chord. Okay, a D minor chord. So this chord here is a D minor. Now have a look at the Lydian. If we build a chord from this step in the Lydian, we have D, F sharp instead of F and A. And the notes D, F sharp and A make a D major chord. So now the normal major scale, we have a C major and a D minor. In Lydian, we have a C major and a D major, so different. Now the next chord doesn't involve an F of any sort, or the fourth degree, E, G, B, E, G, B. So the next one is the same in both keys, it's a minor, okay? If you can't see my terrible writing, where whatever I'm drawing in orange is going to be a minor. If it's in black, it's a major chord. Okay, now the next one is really, really interesting, because in the normal major key, we would have F, A, C, and that would make up an F major chord, normal F major. Now already we've got something incredibly interesting, because we're not even starting from F now, we're starting from F sharp. So the whole pitch of the chord has changed completely. And we have an F sharp, an A and a C. And an F sharp, an A and a C creates, oh, let's do it in a different colour, maybe let's do it in red, creates an F sharp diminished chord. So goodness me, look, C major, D minor, E minor, F major, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished. We're ending up with completely different chords in this example. And if I'd have chosen one of these other modes, you'd have ended up with different chords again. So each mode gives you different chords, which creates a different feeling when you compose using them. I'll just speed up a little bit to save a bit of time, but the G, because it doesn't use the fourth degree, it goes G, B, and then it comes back here to D, is going to be the same in both of them. So that's a major. The A chord, the chord starting on the sixth degree, I should say, doesn't use the fourth, so that's going to stay the same as well, just to save a bit of time. So in both keys, that's going to be a minor. And then the seventh chord, now this is a bit weird because we're going to have to come back to the start of the scale, but the seventh chord in the normal key of C major is B, D, and F. It's involved in that fourth degree. And in the normal scale, that one is a diminished chord. Okay? Diminished chord is just a first, a flatted third, and a flatted fifth. Don't worry about that, but if you find that interesting, that's what it is. Now, this one, if we use a B, a D, and an F sharp, we actually end up with a B minor. So again, totally different chords, even though only one note has changed. Isn't that interesting? Just changing that one note in the mode changes everything. So if you're composing in this structure, it's going to give you a completely different feeling. I'll give you an example what I mean. Let's take that classic 1-4-5 progression. We've looked at this in other videos quite a lot. So I'm just going to keep it as normal 3-part chords. I'm just going to play a C, an F, and a G. And in the normal key, the Ionian or the major key, those are just normal major chords, so C, F, and G. Okay, just playing C, F, G, C. Now, if I play that same progression in C Lydian, the fourth chord is going to be an F sharp diminished. That's actually really easy to play. That's just the Hawaiian D7. It's another way of thinking of that chord. But it changes everything. So our normal 1-4-5 progression is completely changed in F Lydian. Let's look at another of our one of the most famous progressions, and one that we've done with already in these videos. Remember our old favourite 2-5-1 that's used a lot in jazz music? Rather than the minor 7 and stuff, I'm just going to keep this as normal 3-part chords. So in the normal key of C, Ionian, we would have D minor, G major, and C major. D minor, G major, C major. Let's do that again. D minor, G major, and C. Which has a very kind of interesting sound to it. You've got that melancholy of that minor, which leads you into that G, and then a resolution to the C. But we have major, major, major. It's going to lose that melancholy at the start. So I'll do that again. As opposed to... And that's why this mode is thought of as quite a bright, quite a cheerful sounding mode, because it kind of lifts everything. When we use that 2-5-1 progression, you have that really nice major chord in there. So if you imagine we did this with all the other modes, we'd end up with different sets of chords in each one for our common progressions. And it's another way that modern pop musicians are coming back to modes. For years we had modes as being kind of medieval, ancient Greek music, medieval church music, classical music, and then in popular music they kind of disappeared for a long time. And then in modern pop music, they're starting to make a return. There's quite a few modern pop pieces which use the Lydian mode and a few others. So it's worth learning some of these. Remember, one last time I'm going to say it, if you know your major and your minor scales and you learn them in relation, it's not too much to learn, I absolutely promise. And also remember, we hardly ever use that Locrian because it's weird sounding, really weird. We rarely use the Phrygian, so there's not too many to learn as well. Okay, so have fun with modes. Maybe explore doing a little bit of composing yourself or creating your own melodies, and let me know how you get on. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.